Directly on the front page this morning of all the news sites that I pulled up was this Fox News article, and it was posted about 5 hours ago, maybe about 5.5 hours ago now, by Joshua Nelson. The title is Colorado Teachers Union Passes Resolution Declaring Capitalism Inherently Exploits Children, Public Schools. So they declared that they're not going to be teaching capitalism anymore. Colorado Education Association, CEA, reportedly passed a resolution that declares that capitalism inherently exploits children, public schools, land, labor, and resources. A final version of the resolution that was passed states that CEA believes that capitalism requires exploitation of children, public schools, land, labor, and resources. Capitalism is in opposition to fully addressing systematic racism. The school is a prison pipeline. Climate change, patriarchy, gender disparities, education inequality, and income inequality. The irony is that statement matches communism. Capitalism is not the problem. Greed and corruption on either end of the scale exist. In a communist society, you're going to have the elite of the elite own everything, and everybody else shall have nothing and be happy. And no happiness is not bred in that environment. Because for human beings, much of our happiness comes from our intellectual ability, our ability to express our thoughts, to be free. And on the other side, capitalism has its own greed and fraud. And we're seeing that firsthand right now, specifically over the last few years, if it wasn't evident before. But take off the 1% on either end, and if you look at the two systems, one completely corrupts and destroys a society until it runs into the ground. The other elevates society into untold possibilities. So here we have Colorado Teachers Union passes resolution declaring capitalism as inherently exploits children, public schools, etc. So let's take a peek down this road a little bit here. First of all, I want to talk about California again. Remember when they passed the resolute that you can no longer put couches on your porch in Colorado? This is because Colorado had the bright idea that you could openly and freely use marijuana. And so many people were falling asleep on their porches that the porches were, the sofas that they were falling asleep on were catching on fire. And you know, only the nicest homes in the neighborhood have a sofa on their porch. So they were catching on fire and it was burning down the houses. So they actually had to come up with what they called a peace plan in Boulder that banned sofas on porches. So if we look at capitalism, I just want to quickly look at a definition here. It's an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. Capitalism is an economic system characterized by private ownership of the means of production, especially in the industrial sector. Capitalism depends on the enforcement of private property rights, which provide incentives for investment in productive use of productive capital. Now, if we go back to the original settlement in the United States, prior to the United States, when the Puritans came over, they did a series of experiments. In fact, they were set to use more of a communist mindset. Not that they called it that, but they wanted to have very much a shared economy. So they got off the boat, they got a piece of land, they started developing that land. Everybody pitched in, everybody shared. Well, what they realized is not everybody was pitching in on the same level. You know, not everybody had the same skill set. The men might have had a different skill set than the women. Some of the men had a different skill set than the other men, as an example. And everybody wasn't pulling the same weight. And they had a lot of death. They had a lot of illness. They really needed to figure out something else and something else quickly. So they decided they were not going to do the shared system in the way that they had laid out. Instead, they were going to divide up the land. Each family got a parcel, and from that parcel, they could use it the way they wanted to. They could grow food, they could raise animals, they could, whatever part of society they wanted. And then it created a barter system. Whatever you created on your property, you were able to sell, trade with another property. And all of a sudden, the community came back together. And they noticed that rather than struggling and even through starvation, they were able to raise their level of success in production multitudes beyond the path that they were on. People were motivated. It wasn't just going to be given to them. They needed to stand up for themselves and work in order to have something to trade. So what is the basics of the American dream? The whole basis is the ability to be able to be born at any level of society in the United States or anywhere around the world and come to the United States and have an idea, have energy, and create what you have in your mind. Now, from that path, you're able to not just exist beyond survive, but actually thrive. And the idea of a white picket fence and a family, with a 1 or 2 story home, nice and safe, this time of smiling and laughing and having excess funds in order to spend the time with your family. This is really part of the American dream. And as part of that American dream, you can decide where you fit in society. Are you going to be a business owner? Are you going to be a corporate leader? Are you going to be a politician? Are you going to be one of the key workers in society that's going to help boost the economy? There's a lot of phenomenal roles. Do you want to help with the government sector? Maybe be a teacher, protect and serve, fight fires. You pick and choose within that. And as part of society, the concept is everybody participates with taxes, and as taxes get spread around in order to assist with the growth of the capitalist society. Everybody pitches in, you get roads paved. Everybody pitches in, that fire department doesn't have to be volunteer. Everybody pitches in, you can have a police department. Well, as we've seen that the taxation process has gotten so far out of control, we are taxed beyond any other period in this country. We are noticing that, wait a minute, what they're talking about as capitalism being bad is actually another system pushing its head on through and taking away the American dream. So we really need to be very clear on what is what. If we look on the other side, and I just did the same thing, I Googled a definition and then key pictures. So for here, we've got communism on the other end of the spectrum. It's a political theory derived from Karl Marx. So we're going to talk about Marxism, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. So we've seen in Cuba, as an example, a taxi driver may actually get paid more than a doctor. They're not honored the same, but if everybody gets the same baseline and you help tourists as a taxi driver, you're going to have an opportunity for tips, as just a basic example. So in the end, not everybody gets paid the same, but the government has to allow that to occur. They have to allow a tourism arm to peak up. They have to allow the tips. They have to, in order to allow the off balance. What happened to the education and intelligence and strength and the need for doctors? It wasn't a necessity in the society. So as you look through different definitions of just the core of what communism is, we already see in the definitions restrictions that are very different than what communism frames and than what capitalism frames. So again, I just put in capitalism and got white picket fence. I got, United States. But here I put in North Korea, and the images are very different. It's about war and fighting and power. I don't see any happy families as far as the images that are being portrayed. And this is the path that is rooting forward. And we can see that it will root forward for a number of reasons. One path that doesn't push others but allows others to choose freely is often going to go a place of artistic ability and creativity and intellectual. But if you don't let the people think, you tell them what to do, you corral them, all of a sudden you can get the masses to go in the direction that you want. And then you are a dictator, not a leader. You are not raising intellect around you, but you are squashing anybody who might have more intelligence or strength than you. And this is the path we're going down. So a lot of people in the United States don't quite understand not just the threat of communism around the world, but the reality of the communist agenda in the United States. And here I'm looking at archive.org. These were the 45 declared goals. So the title is The Original Complete List of the 45 Declared Goals for the Communist Takeover of America. That's correct. Now, we've heard of this over the years. There's been a series of meetings. In fact, there are still organizations throughout the United States who support this agenda. And if we don't believe it, we just have to look to the administration that's been calling the shots over the last couple years. What happened there? The spin was so fast, the takedown has been abrupt. We started with basic jellyfishing, the concept where you go in to solve one problem and you swing around so much, you knock over 10, 12, 15 other issues that cause major problems. If we look at the ports off the coast of California, they went in to solve the problem, which we know that they did not. And they created a whole series of issues, both on land and overseas. So from this article, on January 10th, 1963, the House of Representatives and later the Senate began reviewing a document entitled Communist Goals for Taking Over America. It contained an agenda of 45 separate issues, attacks, and techniques that in hindsight were quite shocking and are actually equally stunning today. But when we go through the list, they're going to seem all too familiar as a reality that we're living in. Over the past 50 plus years, since the list was introduced in the House, and again, this isn't just you and I on the street corner sipping our coffee talking about this. We are talking about the House of Representatives and the Senate reviewing the document. So 50 years ago, when this was introduced in the House, many things have changed. Among them, the Soviet Union is gone and communism isn't mentioned by the controlled MSN anymore. Why? Because the founders of communism, World Zionism, is now the dominant force in the Western world and controls virtually every major geopolitical, social, cultural, and commercial aspect of our existence. Do you see that? They don't have to speak the term anymore because it's here. They brought it in. They were successful. When you stand up and look around at the systems that you're living in, for many, it's hard to believe, but every system we have in the United States has now been corrupted. And if you might recall, the core article that I'm discussing today is the Colorado Teachers Union passes resolution declaring capitalism as a system of exploitation. Most importantly, about 27 of the 45 communist goals on the original list have been or are being achieved. That's significant. History has largely retired the other 18. These remaining 27 will or should shock you. It is essential to also understand that this world created communism. It took down Russia, set up the Soviet Union, and created 2 world wars in which over 100 million people died. These are people like you and I, our parents, our children. Whether the term communism or Bolshevism or socialism or Marxism, they all emanate from one source, and they must be forgotten. So I want to, that other article, you have to dig down a little bit deeper to get the goals. So I'm now on ethanallen.org. I don't know anything about this site, but it does list the 45 communist goals from 58 years ago by Tom Licata. This was actually in July of 2021. On the founding of our nation's 245th birthday, it would be nice to set our eyes on the window displaying blue skies, but out on the another window displays storm clouds. Montpellier's decision to cancel my meaningful 4th of July recognition, along with our schools and our very own government promoting CRT and BLM, tell us all we need to know about the ominous clouds. Both these movements, they're Marxist in origin. And if you want to read more of this, the link is there. But the reality is here, and I'm going to skip on down here. In order to get a better understanding of the storm clouds, he's going to examine the 45 communist and an extension of socialist and progressive goals that have been read into our congressional record. Number 1, and I am going to take time to go through all of these. If you're not interested, go ahead and skip ahead. But I think this is really going to be quite awakening. Number 1, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Which one's been captured? Number 2, get control of the schools and teachers association and soften the curriculum. The curriculum is so soft in California, specifically in Palo Alto, that last year my son did a math challenge. He was in 4th grade, and just math homework. That's what it was. And I looked through the pages and I looked at it and I said, congratulations. I don't know how you managed to do it, but you got every single one wrong. And that was baffling to me. This kid is brilliant. And he said, no, Mom, I don't think you read the instructions. So he brought me back to the instruction page, and I kid you not, this is math. This isn't spelling. This isn't phonics. This isn't art. This is mathematics. The instructions actually said, solve the problem by writing down something that seems reasonable. Don't be exact. Don't calculate. Just write down something that seems reasonable. How much softer can the curriculum be? But when we say get control of the schools and teachers associations, that's what we just saw, correct? Colorado Teachers Union passes resolution against capitalism, which means for communism. Gain control of all student newspapers. This is the Facebook idea, correct? If you start with a link at the university level, then you can link them all together and gonna go ahead and control the outcome of the time of year when we go to voice our opinion. Gain control of all of them. Or what about what Apple did? Apple decided to give free computers to all the universities and then down to high schools, so that the students would be used to using their technology over the opponent's technology, and would therefore go into businesses and say, mine is better than yours, this is what I want, and demand it. And that's really how we saw such a quick growth and adaptation. He was ready to wait a few years for them to graduate and get into the workforce, but that push was really a propellant for him. Number 4, infiltrate the press. Hands down, we can stop here. The MSN is not trustworthy, it's not reliable, and it doesn't look at it matter which one you look at. It's all spewing propaganda and lies. And even if there's some truth there, it's just enough truth to make you say, wow, this is it, while it's hiding something more important behind it. They're infiltrated. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and pictures. Create your own propaganda and make the movie or the story or the news story. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and the press. Eliminate them all. Are we not seeing that craziness in our society today? Censorship? And yet on October 19th of 2019, Twitter purged the voices speaking out against this. We saw massive upheaval over the YouTube channels. Who's being censored? And who's had their finger pointed in their face saying that they are limiting free speech? It's a lie. And they're absolutely purposely lying. They'll lie to your face, as they have been. They'll even yell at you. They'll yell louder and louder to get you to back down. Number 7, break down cultural standards by standards of morality by promoting this and obscenity in the media. You know, if you look at pictures, even 10 years ago, the rating system was different. Movie producers would get nervous if their rating became too high because that would cut out a segment of the population to view it. So they would make sure that scenes fit within the box. Now those rating systems have been stretched out, and your eyes are seeing things that shouldn't be unseen. But worse than your eyes, what about your children's eyes? I have to tell my son that, you know, I'm not afraid of you on your iPhone. He's a good, responsible kid. But even as simple as watching a YouTube video with somebody he watches every week, just, you know, somebody playing games or whatever they're doing, there's no restriction. All of a sudden, that individual could use words or language that he learned that week at school and is now using it on his YouTube channel. And I wouldn't have an ability to know. And now it's in my son's vernacular. But even worse, even if he's just watching an innocent channel with even, let's say there's restrictions on it, YouTube itself is pumping into the commercials or the ads things that no adult should even see. It's disgusting and inappropriate and certainly not for children, but they're feeding it out there and they're forcing it. So those cultural standards, once removed, are very, very almost impossible to get back in the box. In fact, we have a huge problem with addiction in this country. And it's not just addiction of drugs and alcohol and some of the more common that we hear about, but the addiction of the word in the middle of the sentence there, of graphy, is really getting out of hand and taking down families. Number 8, present this word and degeneracy and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. You wonder where all this came from? It didn't rise up by accident. It was almost 2 years ago that I had to sit and watch a man dressed as a woman on a pole during a training class at a Fortune 500 company. What kind of moral, how does that add to the sales or the bottom line, other than they are so woke, that is the direction that they're going? And yet you speak out against it, you're the one that's fired. I'm going to read that one again. Break down the cultural standards of morality by promoting this in the media and present these concepts as normal, natural, and healthy. They are not normal, they are not natural, and they are not healthy. Number 9, infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Were not all the churches forced to shut down during the last few years? I know they were not all forced, because mine did not. And yet we are still in an ongoing legal battle. The criminal charges have been dropped, but the Substack article shows the level of surveillance that we all underwent was not a part of our administration. And the fines at one point got up to almost $4 million for being a church of people who were not sick, gathering to serve our Lord during a time where our country was being taken over and we were told to sit in our homes, cover our faces, and not even talk to our families. If anybody didn't see a problem with that, they had already drank the Kool-Aid. So here we have, beyond infiltrating churches, look at how many pastors got arrested during this period of time. Okay, number 9, eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. This is right here. You don't think this accidentally happened? And this is drilled in at the most basic elementary levels. Separate that church and state. Don't have the USA flag hanging there. Don't pledge allegiance. Don't have any reverence. We used to have a morning prayer. It went to a moment of silence. They don't do any of that anymore. It wasn't by accident. This initiative stepped in and pushed it out. What happened is we were told not to speak about religion or politics. It's wrong. You're violating their rights. Meanwhile, while they pushed back and pushed back, they brought in their own religion and their own politics. And now we are supposed to step back in our homes with our masks on. This elimination of prayer was part of the takedown of the schools. And it's very interesting as you look at the family, specifically the mother and child who were involved in eliminating prayers in the schools. The mother was, the word came to mind, but I'm not going to say it here. But the son, we'll just skip to that. He ended up being a devoutly religious man as he realized the precepts of what had been argued were destroying this country and took away from his family and were destroying lives. It's quite an interesting historical perspective to look that up. Taking away prayer from the school was a huge pivotal moment that broke apart children from their families. And of course, pulled children away from God. Number 10, discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate and old-fashioned. Have you not heard them? They don't even argue the Constitution anymore. We're beyond that. They just completely ignore it. Those amendments, they won't even reference them. They do their own thing. Number 11, discredit the American founding fathers as selfish aristocrats and racist. See, they're establishing this as truth based on a lie. It doesn't use evidence. There's no evidence based here. It's just do it, discredit them. Start spreading gossip and rumors. Make it the truth. Hey, put it in the textbooks. Get it taught to the children in an earlier generation so they believe that this is what happened. This is the basis of what we're having now for CRT. Now, I'll be the first one to stand up and say that I admit on any end of the spectrum, you've got individuals who don't belong in society. You've got individuals who are so filled of hatred or greed or whatever those driving factors really are not good for society. But again, chop off the 1% on either side, and you've got the core group of people who sincerely want the best for themselves, their family, and the world around them. But then you have to understand that the road to hell is said to have been paved in good intentions. Do you want the best for those around you by buying into philosophical views that are based on lies? Or how do we know the truth? When you speak the truth, the lights go on. There's an energy, there's a freedom that occurs. And out of that comes untold intellectual property and ability for growth for humanity. The freedom is really part of the key. Number 12, belittle American culture and discourage the teaching of American history. Don't teach American history. Don't let people know about the greatness of this country. And sure, do the truth. Show mishaps and follies. Part of being in a thriving company or a growing organization is realizing you got to make a decision fast, and you have to fail even faster. Get out there with that decision, try it. If it doesn't work, don't keep going down that path, cut it off quickly and move forward to the next idea. Teach that in the schools. What worked, what didn't. But to take out all the greatness and to focus on ideologies that are really meant solely to discredit and murk the water and honestly completely divide. This is where it came from. It's rooted in the 45 communist goals. The next one is, where are we at here? Number 13, discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. What have we seen this year? They have been caught in almost every scandal for covering, for lying, for raiding. You name it, their fingers have been in the middle of it. So you have to ask yourself, who's on the other side? So we saw a peak of this between Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. As it came out, the FBI had their fingers involved in Twitter, was calling the shots. So we know that CIA is more on the side of Facebook. They each picked the horses and ran with it. And I pointed out in an earlier segment where the funding comes from. You've got DARPA, you have other organizations that are funded by taxpayer dollars that are paying for innovation in order to control you, the taxpayer. And here, by discrediting and eventually dismantling the FBI, that does not mean that we don't have an intelligence arm anymore. That means we don't have this intelligence arm. As we look at the communist societies, they have the ultimate in intelligence arms, except for none of it is for the people. Now, I'm not standing up for what the FBI has been caught doing over the last few years. They're corrupt from the top down. But an awareness that, wait a minute, just like, do we recall defund police? How well has that gone for the communities that embrace that concept? In society, especially societies that are being thrown down a path of chaos, destruction, and lighting it on fire, we need guardrails, and those guardrails need to be monitored. Number 14, infiltrate and gain control of big business and unions. Was it not Home Depot and Walmart, the big box stores, that got to stay open while mom and pop stores had to shut down? Look at the attacks against unions. Rip apart all the blue collar workers that have worked every day of their life with their hands in order to create something else for society or better for society or provide the basic needs for society. And yet they literally point out they're going to infiltrate and gain control. Now, if we look at a point that I raised yesterday, back to the teachers union, which is what we're seeing here is the topic we're talking about for capitalism. The teachers union in California has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in a variety of different funds that take our labor, our intellectual property, our assets, and put them overseas as gifts for them to control, for them to grow, and for them to capitalize on within their communist societies. We've given it away. Those are through the unions, the union pensions. Number 15, transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Why should a social agency be involved at this level? And yet we see even in my community, there was a prong that happened maybe about a decade now. I don't know the exact start of it. It could have been about 8 years, where they decided that police responding was more costly and not as effective. And there were incidents with the police. So what did they do? They hired civilians. They gave civilians an armed piece and a car and sent them out there. They're not trained officers. And yet they're the social group that goes out there to calm society. Meanwhile, everything has gotten out of control. The unhoused, the thefts, the break-ins. And this concept came from right here. It wasn't just created. And again, that was transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Have we not seen the rise of child protective services and the child trafficking that has come out of that? Treat all behavioral problems as mental health or social problems. This is absolutely key. Now, this is a part B on number 15. But this is very, very serious. There's been a lot of mental issues that came out of these last few years. And I'll say that my own mind has been greatly challenged. As I walked to go to a bank and I'm yelled at and screamed at and I'm not allowed to enter because I don't have a mask covering my face to walk into a bank. Day after day after day, this can really wear on a person as you're told to go hide in your home, not see your family. Well, what if somebody already was on the verge of mental illness? The fear of being forced in their homes and turning on constant negative news would really push somebody over the edge. Well, what if we add to that drugs? Now we have street drugs and we have legal drugs. Legal drugs are known as pharmaceuticals. What if during the same period of time, people were being separated? By people, I mean specifically younger individuals, were being separated from their family. Testosterone or the other drugs that they're pumping into them without their parents' knowledge. Constant whispers of you're not good enough, but if you change your sexual outlook, then you can be. All of this drills in and drills in and drills in. And if we look at the issue right now of Bud Light, which why the Navy followed in that footsteps, who hasn't woken up to what's going on? But this is part of the agenda. They're going to keep pushing forward and pushing forward until you back down, until it becomes normal. But if we look at the Bud Light issue, you know, I don't drink. So this isn't a realm that I'm overly familiar with, but we all know the brand, we all know the label, we all saw what happened. It unraveled in front of us. A typical blue collar consumable item, well known, and I don't know if it's well respected or not, but it was something that was inexpensive, casual, really brought people together. And yet, what did they do with that? They said it was too fratty. Let's go another direction. By cutting off your entire consumer base, you're going to go another direction. Well, you know, the bars suffered a little bit as they weren't able to sell. The distributors suffered as they had extra. You know, we can go down the list. I do not feel bad at all for the VP who had this brilliant idea. Sincerely hope there was a lesson learned there, but I know that probably more of an anger situation came up out of that. Clearly, the company has not learned its lesson because the people came out and said, look, we just want an apology and to go back to the way we were. An apology still hasn't come out. A comment by the CEO that didn't even address the issue is not the same as an apology. We teach our children how to apologize. An apology has multiple parts. An apology starts with, I am sorry for doing X, Y, and Z. So you've acknowledged that you're on the same page. You then make sure that that individual is expecting an apology for that particular issue, or is it something else altogether? And you restate the apology if necessary. Get on the same page, apologize for something that in some way hurt somebody else. But then lay out what you are going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. There was none of that in this situation. There wasn't even a CEO comment directly related to what was going on. It was just a general, almost a, hey, how you do? Not even a mea culpa. But in this case, what we saw, and this is why this is really important, treat all behavioral problems as mental health or social problems. The one individual that I feel got hurt is, I actually pray for. The person whose image got put up everywhere as highlighted for this individual on a pedestal that has great feelings, that is a human being that's been manipulated, that just 10 years ago would have been looked at as a possible mental illness and some additional assistance, just to make sure this is right. Not saying that it's wrong, but just making sure that that was the right decision. But instead, held up on a pedestal, and then unfortunately, the words can be so very cruel. The words hurt me and you. The words hurt, they hurt. And there was a statement that I did see come out after my son and I had talked about this, that we have to be aware of everybody involved. Sure, the individual probably got paid a lot of money and got a lot of notoriety and a lot of different contracts after that, but money isn't everything. And then the statement came out of how much this person's feelings were hurt and being battered. And it broke my heart. The absolute using of people in order to get to their agenda. So treat all behavior problems as mental health and social problems. So what have they done instead? They've taken people like you and I and threatened us with mental health issues, social problems. The last time I went to a doctor was just less than a couple months ago now. Here we're 3 years past the start of this lockdown scenario. Most of the country doesn't play this game anymore. And yet I go into a scientific medical office and I have not even gotten over threshold. I'm still in the breezeway and I'm confronted by individuals who want to rip me apart because I didn't come prepared with a mask on my face. After realizing that the mental health issues are on the other side, sometimes you just got to pick your battles. So I politely said, if you have one, I'd be happy to put one on. They refused to provide me with one, even though they had one in their hand. They wanted to make a mockery of me in front of everybody. The thing is, it didn't make a mockery of me. It really pointed out the mental illness. But then I got a copy of my medical records, and the medical records state that I have serious behavioral issues. This is where it comes from, the Communist Manifesto. I don't have a behavioral issue. I have an issue where I can think on my own. I appreciate freedom and I love this country. I didn't stand and argue or fight. I just politely stood out in the breezeway and allowed them to argue and scream and yell. Who has the behavioral issues and the instability? But we can see that as we look around. Number 16, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. No fault divorce, just call it quits. We not only see this as a discredit of the family in the school saying that, hey, you know, your parents just don't know. Hey, our school is better than yours. Listen to your teachers. Go tell the the admin, they'll work with you. Your parents probably won't. In fact, we don't even have to tell them. Let's just keep this a secret. Anytime somebody says to tell a child to keep a secret, you know they're on the wrong path. They don't have the best interest of that child or the family in mind. Discrediting the family, how absolutely disgusting is that? We are meant to be in family clusters. By being with generations, we can see the success of those that have come before us, the strength, the lessons, the pitfalls that they've gone. We can see when illness hits, how to survive and thrive and how to help one another. By being in a community where you can see younger children within your family, you can learn to help and guide and teach. These sandwich generations of gathering around a family, eating, vacationing, spending time together. This is the truth. This is who we are. And yet to actually discredit the family and encourage people just sleep around and easily divorce. Oh, what's this? The next part, if you don't like it, then come to California and get rid of it, even after the baby's born. I mean, how disgusting. Where on this sliding scale is enough? Let's go on to another 17. And if you're not surprised, so far, every single one of these, when they were discussed almost 60 years ago or 50 years ago, we're like, hey, that's never going to happen in this country. And yet everyone is familiar to our day-to-day life today. Not one of these is a shock. It's just a shock that it was written down and pushed forward as a matter of a plan. 17, emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Have we not seen this? Every child is America's child. We know better than the parents. Let's go ahead and take these children away and teach them on our own. The negative influence of parents right there. 18, repeal the Connolly Reservation, allowing the world court jurisdiction over nations and individuals alike. WEF, World Economic Forum, UN, United Nations, NATO, goes down the list. All these countries have banded together to make sure that one world government controls nations and individuals alike. So you can see the URL here. I highly recommend that you go back and read this for yourself. This particular one is ethanallen.org, 45_goals_goals_from_58_years_ago. This is real. This is happening. This is now. This is what is destroying our country. This is why when you say, did that really happen? Yes, it not only happened, but it was planned. And when you ask, are people not thinking? Do they not see the truth? That's correct. They don't and they can't see it. The veil is over their eyes and they have bought into this Marxist agenda that is creating a world of communism. And again, if we don't believe it, just look to today's news. Colorado Teachers Union passes resolution declaring capitalism as inherently exploiting children, public schools, land use, etc. They are denouncing capitalism to get rid of and stop teaching in the schools. That is the ultimate. Every system we have right now in the United States has been corrupted. It needs to be removed. So if we look at communism, socialism, capitalism, they're all ideologies. They're thoughts, right? It's a thought. And then you put a plan in place. Things come out of it, but it comes with an ideology that shapes socioeconomic and political structures in society. They differ by their views on the ownership and control of means of production and resources. Who owns and controls? A few elite or the masses? We're in a situation right now in the United States where the people fear the government. That's not what the United States is for. That's a communist country. In the United States, the government needs to fear the people. Communism advocates complete governmental control and common ownership, complete government control. And again, there is no government. There is no this entity over there. Government is made up of people, and out of people, you have the core elite who make the rules, who collect all the money, who are extremely, extremely wealthy and out of the system. And then they have their peons that are their soldiers that lay down the law and restrict others, and they get, they get the drippings from the table. And then you have the whole rest of society who has nothing and will be happy. Socialism practices flexible forms of state control and co-ownership by workers. It does not. Socialism is all the way over towards communism. So I'll finish this and I'll go back to the scale. Capitalism advocates a free economy and free market without state intervention and privatization of property. Socialism and communism are often confused with each other, but they are fundamentally different, the article says, and no, they are fundamentally the same. So if you have a spectrum and you just look at, let's say, a line, for lack of better, in front of you, on the line, you're going to have maybe let's just start with capitalism. And then next to capitalism, you're going to have socialism. And then you're going to have Marxism. And then you're going to have communism. Those three are very closely related, just a hop, skip, and a jump over the border to the next one. So I want to give another image here. So I pulled up these images of bridges, and you can be on any bridge. You can imagine a bridge. But the idea of capitalism is you're going to raise funds, create a crew to build the bridge, all the steps that go into that. That's jobs for everybody involved. Everybody that participates will get payment. And out of the capitalism, you eventually have a bridge that people can cross and expand their trading opportunities. So that would be a core. But if you look at capitalism, there's opportunity there, freedom there. If you look at communism or socialism or Marxism, because again, they're not fundamentally different, they're at the core the same, then what we see is we have a bridge that's already built, because communism doesn't do a lot of infrastructure to help the people. So more than likely, something's already been built or built by the government using what would be more akin to slave labor or unpaid. But we've got a bridge here. And let's say you've got capitalists on one side and you've got communists on the other. The capitalists are so busy doing their own thing, focusing on their families, focusing on God, focusing on education, really looking at intellectual opportunities and freedom, that they're not focused on controlling others. They're focusing on looking up and outward. But meanwhile, on the other side, you've got the communists that have this plan, and they're focused on you. They know their enemy, and you are their enemy. Do you recall the day that you woke up and realized, wait a minute, I am the enemy? That was a huge pivotal point for me during the last few years, to wake up and know that my entire life I've done the best I can, and yet somehow I've become the enemy. So as we move through this process, we see that we are the enemy, and they know that. They know the enemy. They've studied the enemy. They know the art of war. And so from the communist perspective, they know they're going to take down all these systems. So their eyes are on us while our eyes are up to the sky and creating new opportunities. And what they'll do is they'll start with something that'll say, hey, you know what? Let's just have a nice dinner together. Let's not talk about religion or politics. Oh, okay. Let's just talk about something funny. Meanwhile, they have now taken 2 steps closer on that bridge, and you're still standing in the same spot. And then they're going to not talk about religion and politics, but they are going to talk about, this person down the street didn't really know how to raise their children. And, we came in and we helped raise the children and still kept a relationship with the family, but we've done a much better job. And we're realizing that the community really can do a better job than the family. They've just taken 2 more steps further out of a concept of taking the child away from a home rather than fixing a root problem that may or may not have existed. Meanwhile, you're still talking about, hey, isn't that a great idea? We went to play golf today, or we went to do this, and because you're staying away from the religion and politics. So then the next step is they're going to talk about how ridiculous it is that people look towards God. There's no God. There's no evidence of God. They might say, this invisible thing, look towards real stuff. And they've taken another couple steps forward. And at that point, they might have your attention, and you might say, well, I believe in a God, and you'll state why and how. But they'll say, oh, no, don't talk about religion and politics. Oh, okay. So you'll honor that. You'll go back to your intellect. And they've now taken another 6. Well, right now they're midway on that bridge. And then it'll come up to a point of, hey, how about we have computers in the classroom? You're like, no, we don't need computers in the classroom. First of all, we don't need to pull together school funds for that, where the children need to learn basic math, reading, arithmetic. It doesn't require computers. We're paying for teachers. We're going to, well, let's just have, instead of one computer in every classroom, let's have one in the library that they can all sit around. Some point you back down and you say, okay, but you can see what I mean. It's one step, one step, one step. Meanwhile, they're walking across the bridge, and now there's not only computers in every single classroom, but during lockdowns, they sent home a computer with every single child. And I will point out, even though I live in Silicon Valley, all the children were given Google computers. These Google computers had no restrictions on them. These were children, kindergarten, elementary school. And there was no restriction. So in one button, they could see the whole world of the internet. And yes, there were a lot of problems with these issues that we've looked at of promiscuity and worse that can't be unseen by children. And yet we went from one little computer in a library to every child having one with them, while their parents tried to figure out work in their home office during this period of time. And yet they took another few steps across that bridge. And now we're at a point of AI being paramount. Well, meanwhile, even if we take a few steps towards them to reclaim our bridge, then the fighting begins. The bridge starts to burn. We get pushed off the side. And then we're called the ones that are mentally unstable. We are called the ones with social behavioral issues. This is not the truth. We have to wake up to what the actual truth is. We need to be the ones who are awake, not woke, but awake. We need to be aware. We need to identify, and we need to tell the truth. Stand strong, know your grounds, bring God, bring religion, bring politics back into it every day. And let the world know that the United States is going to come back strong. Now, as we look at this, I want to point out something else that's quite interesting. The PTA, Parent Teachers Association, has a huge foothold on the schools. In fact, a couple years ago, I stepped up and I said, if they needed a vice president at the local level, and I said, I've got time this year. If you'd like me to dedicate my time, I'd be happy to help out. If somebody else wants to do it, that's fine. I don't have this isn't some driving force I have. I can still help out. But if somebody else wants that title, that's fine. That was my attitude. I get in there, roll up my sleeves, and I was told that I was not allowed to participate because I spoke out with ideals that the PTA is not allowed to be spoken about. All they do is raise money, and then the money in our case goes to Sacramento and they vote in policies. Well, look at the policies they brought in. They shut down the schools. They vax the kids in the classrooms. And yet PTA fundraisers are a capitalist idea. They go out and do things like are on the screen here: readathons, bake sales, fun runs or walkathons, movie nights, anything they can to raise money. In fact, I always say there's a toll at the edge of my son's school. In order for him to leave school on Thursdays, he has to pass through a farm-sponsored event that usually has no farm food, it's all sugar. Cupcakes and brownies and cookies. And all the kids have to funnel through there. Well, if you're an elementary school kid and you see all that sugar, you're going to want some. So they're expected to pay for this every Thursday in order to get off campus. And they look at it as a capitalist fundraiser. They're raising funds to give more to the students. But in a sense, behind the screen, we know that this isn't capitalism. It's a toll. And the toll funds are going to Sacramento to create laws and rules and regulations and restrictions against these very students and families. So as we come back around the corner here, we really need to be aware to what's going on. This isn't an accident. We're not down this path by on purpose. In fact, when they talk about the plan and in that period of the demic, it was every inch of that has been planned, and it's been planned for a long time. Every system we have is corrupted. So here we have Colorado Teachers Union passes resolution declaring capitalism inherently exploits children and public schools. The Colorado CEA reportedly passed a resolution that declares that capitalism, it's, you know, again, children, public schools, land, labor, and resources. They are declaring a war against capitalism, and the Colorado Teachers Union, which is one of the unions on the list, bid it hook, line, and sinker. Now, can you imagine one of the people who voted for this standing up in front of the classroom to teach your child about life success, how to grow wealth, how to build a healthy family? None of those core values or virtues are going to be taught because they don't believe it themselves. It's actually evil to them. This is something that we really need to understand is not acceptable. It's torn apart society. And they're not even hiding it anymore. It's not in the closet. It's not sneaking up on us. So familiarize yourself with the agenda. Understand that this is real. This is here and now. They're lying to you, and they're lying to you on purpose. Once again, I wish you blessings on this day. Continue to stay awake and shine the light for others.